So again, good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This week has been an interesting week for me. I've been doing a lot of work, and sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There we go. There it is. Thank you. Okay. I was pondering what to talk about this morning. Wasn't really sure where I was going with it. And I pulled a couple of different lectures, and I did a couple of things, and Spirit kept saying to me, no, it has to come from your heart. No, you can't do that. No. So I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about mediumship and what it really is in the spiritual community and what it really means. As most of you know, I am what we call a working medium here in our community. And so I see people in a private practice, and I essentially bring through their loved ones, their family, their friends, people that they need to hear from for closure or for connection or for inspiration. One of the things that I found in my practice is that most of the people who come to me aren't necessarily grieving, believe it or not, which you would think that they are. Most of them have actually already been through what we call the grieving process, the 7 stages of grieving, so they say. And it's interesting that when they finally come and find a medium, thank goodness for the mainstream media now getting out there and talking about mediumship, they're ready. They just want to know that their loved ones are safe and what's going on. And I find in most of my work, not only am I giving the messages from people on the other side, but I'm actually educating. And it's interesting because more often than not, my clients have seen other mediums and they've connected with their spirits and their loved ones and their angels, and yet they don't know where they are or what's going on or how they got there. So I wanted to take a couple minutes today just to talk about what actually happens after we pass away. Death is no stranger to me or to my family and my house. We've lost quite a few people in our lifetime, as such I believe you would have too. And if you haven't, good for you. I'm very happy for you. When we first pass away, no matter how we passed, we end up staying around the body. And it's only usually for maybe a day or so after the spirit has actually left the physical body. After that, we end up connecting with our loved ones. We end up grabbing hold of them and hanging on to their energy so that they know that we're around them. The time of grief after someone's just passed away is absolutely incredible, and the immeasurable amount of pain is astounding. But what's interesting is that in my experience, I found that Spirit literally comes and hangs on to or holds the people that they love. They don't leave right away, which is really comforting to know. Now, after that, they end up trying to figure out what's really going on in their spiritual body. Because you have to remember, we've been in this physical body for so long, and when we're here, most of us, our ego takes over for so much that we forget our spiritual side. So adjusting to a spiritual body where we don't have constraints of time, we don't have constraints of how am I going to get there and what am I going to do. We don't have the physicality that we do here in this lifetime. It can be a little taxing, I'm sure you can understand. So most often people end up staying around their family members or whoever they've attached themselves to for quite some time. In my experience, it's anywhere between 3 months and 2 years, just on an average. After that, we travel through a state of thought, or a vibrational state, we could call it, that I like to call limbo. Now, some religions call this purgatory, and I can't honestly stand that term. I don't believe in the term purgatory because from everything that I've heard from Spirit ever since I was a little girl, it's not real. What happens in limbo is it's a neutral space. Okay, it's a neutral space where Spirit goes, and they're still adjusting at that point. But I find that if I make light of it, people find the middle ground. Because a lot of us have a very Christian background. and really struggle with that thought of purgatory. So when I sit with a client, I usually say to them, limbo is very much like the doctor's waiting office, okay? You can't go back to where you were because you need to see the doctor. You can't have your cell phone, so you can't communicate with your family very well, okay? And if you harass the staff or do hauntings, you stick around longer, okay? So there's this middle ground that we have to find between, you know, what other religions believe in and you know, what we know as truth in spiritualism. Anyway, in limbo, people still are connected to their loved ones, and more often than not, you'll find that people who have been in limbo for a very long time are the ones that like to play tricks on you, or are the hauntings, or even sometimes are the ones that are stuck. You'll know that we have a group of mediums here in our community, the Durham Rescue Mediums, and they go and they help those souls move forward into the light. When they're stuck, it's more often that they don't know which way to go next, or they don't know where to turn to next, or what else is coming up. Now, sometimes I've noticed Spirit chooses to stay stuck, believe it or not. And that has more to do with their free will than anything else. There is nothing, I can tell you this in all honesty, there is nothing that can keep you here earthbound. Okay? So when you think of your family who's crossed over, know that they can move forward. No matter what happened to them, no matter how they pass, they can move forward. Yes. After that, we have heaven or the afterlife, okay, or the white light, whatever you would like to call it. When we move into that state, or just before we get into that state, I like to call it a point of review, life review, that we essentially do. Now, in other religions, they call this the judgment, okay, God's moment of judgment, and as to whether we'll get into the white light or heaven. Point of review, or life review, is really a very interesting concept. But it takes what we talk about in the 7 principles, personal responsibility, to a whole new level. When we get to this state of point of review, I like to say that we've been ushered into a little room. And in this room, we can either watch our life from beginning to end, read the story of our life from beginning to end, or reenact our life from beginning to end. You can imagine that there are some points in our lifetimes where we don't necessarily want to relive, okay? The process of reliving it or reevaluating it is so that we can literally process it, so we can take ownership and know the lessons that we had to learn from these things, and understand why these things happened to us, or why we did what we did. And please remember, we're all human having a human experience at this time, and we can only do so much with what we're given. So I'm not bashing anyone, please don't think that I am, but understanding that moving forward is really much easier if you do try to remain to do your best every day. And you do try to live in the light, and you do take care of your brother man, or your fellow man, or sister, or whomever. Because the point of review is just, it can be very overwhelming. So when we're in the state of point of review, there's absolutely no communication I found from Spirit. And most of the time, that's when clients come to see me, because up until that point, they've felt their family members around. They've watched them walk past a doorway, or felt them brush their cheek, or they've been getting messages like dimes, or pennies, or butterflies, or certain things. But at this point, this is when the person, the soul, the spirit, really reflects on what their life was about. After that, we get into, after we take ownership, we get into heaven, or the afterlife, or the white light. And we can come and go as we please. We have our free will back again, which is such a beautiful thing. And so special. We forget and we take advantage of our free will all the time. It's unfortunate, really, but I think that's also part and parcel of being human. Anyway, I wanted to tell you a brief story about something that actually happened to me probably around this time last year. A very good girlfriend of mine who had actually attended some of the spiritual classes here at the Divine Light had lost her sister. Her sister was in her early 30s, and it was a very unexpected passing. My girlfriend had a suspicion that her sister was still around, but she couldn't prove it. And of course, being so sensitive and being so emotionally raw, it would be very difficult to connect with someone who you were very close with. So she called me and she said, "Truly, I've lost my sister." And she was very distraught. So I went over and I spoke with her and I said, "Can you give me some information? Can you tell me maybe how she passed or what was going on?" And I proceeded to explain to her that her sister wasn't lost. Unfortunately, her sister had committed suicide. And in their upbringing and in their faith, she believed that her sister was going to hell, which she struggled with quite a bit. And as I explained to her that ideally, there is no such place as hell. This is as good as it's going to get when it comes to that. So when we look at the life and moving forward, her sister may stay here on the earth plane for quite some time because she had small children. Or she may stay in limbo for quite some time because of her own belief systems. But it's not that we couldn't move her forward. A couple days went by and I kept connection with my friend, kept sending her love and surrounding her family, especially the children. And I told her if she needed anything, she could call on me. The day of the funeral arrived, and the funeral was quite a ways away, and I wasn't supposed to go. And it was interesting because my day was cleared as if by magic. Everything I was supposed to do that day got changed. So I said, "Okay, I get the message, I hear you." So I drove the 3 hours away to the sister's funeral. And as I walked into the funeral parlor, I actually saw the sister who had passed. She greeted me at the door, and she had thanked me for coming. She said that she had hoped that I would come so that I could pass on some messages for her family. So she wrapped her arm around me, which is very unusual for Spirit to do, to get that close. But she wrapped her arm around me and she walked me right into my girlfriend. And as my girlfriend turned and looked up and saw me, she broke into tears. And she said, "I knew you were going to come. I knew you couldn't come or you weren't supposed to, but I knew you would be here." So as we walked up to the casket, hand in hand, I have one sister on this side who's living, and one sister on this side who's passed. And it was interesting because the sister who had passed hadn't been well for a while. And there was some talk about some legal action and holding other people accountable and responsible and whatnot. And the sister who had passed had said, "Just tell her to let me go. I don't want to be held. I don't want to be left. I don't want to be held down anymore. I don't want anybody else to be accountable for what I've done. I want you to know I love you. And thank you so much for taking on my children. But let me go." And as I stood there, trying not to bawl as I'm doing now, and I told this to the living sister, she said, "I knew that's what she wanted. I just needed to hear it from someone else." Standing there, looking at the deceased body and having the spirit of the person beside me was an incredible moment for me as a medium, but also as a human being. We don't realize how much love we have for our fellow man until they're gone or they've disappeared. And it's unfortunate. Mediumship is so very incredible. Every day when I wake up, I thank God for the opportunity to bring forward the messages from people who've passed. the messages to help comfort people and guide them and inspire them to move forward and do the things that they need to do. Every time I sit and do a reading, I say to God, thank you for keeping me humble. Thank you for keeping me in your graces. Thank you for allowing me to share your messages and your will. Because it's not me. I am the channel. I am the one just to give the message. It doesn't come from me. I don't generate it. But when it comes through and when it's accurate, what a difference it can make for a person. Mediumship has been a lot of my life, particularly essentially in the last 3 years, but in the last 10 for sure. That's how long I've been on the board, huh? 10 years?
So.
Yeah. And I find that as the time goes by, my skills become more attuned, and I become a little bit more aware and craft my craft, so to speak, a little bit more. But what I want to say is that mediumship can be such a wonderful experience for people who need to know that they're loved. Just simply need to know that they're loved and still loved. Anyway, on that note, I'd like to tell you I love you. And I want to thank you for coming today. And God bless.
Thank you.